Okay, so the next sample we're working on is the Flyfront with the zip. This is the Flyfront here, and then it will have a facing on the inside, and it is top stitch. So we'll be sewing this in muslin. You also need interfacing for this one. Okay, so this is a template that we'll be using to cut it out, and I just need to cut around the bold line for each of these. Okay, there is a slight misprint on this template. So this is just cut one layer in muslin face up. We will cut this piece as one layer in muslin face up. And then we will be cutting this shape here and interfacing that will be face up. So the adhesive side will be face up. And then we'll be cutting this piece so that this edge here, the lengthwise edge, is on the fold. Okay, so I'll be cutting one layer. So the fabric is not folded here. Okay, so this piece for the shield is on the fold on this lengthwise edge, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it. Okay, so for my interfacing pieces, I do need to interface the shield, which is that piece that was cut one on the fold. Okay, and then I also need to cut from this piece just this shape and interfacing. So I'm actually going to go in and with my paper scissors just cut this piece off, not cut the muslin, but just the paper template piece. And I'm going to cut one layer of interfacing, making sure my adhesive side, so that's your side, one side is smooth, one side is either shiny with the adhesive or it has goosebumps on the fusible interfacing, or it could be scratchy if you have woven interfacing or knit interfacing, it could be scratchy. So I'm going to pin this down. And I'm actually going to go next to fuse these two pieces to their corresponding pieces. So this should fit in place here, and we're going to fuse it. And I'm going to do this with the iron. Okay, and this one has its corresponding muslin piece. And this will be fused to the wrong side. Okay, so I am going to fuse my pieces here before I serge. And adhesive is face down on the wrong side of the fabric. I'm going to use a pressing claw. Okay, and that's fused. Don't worry about any extra because we can get that with the serger. But if you want to trim it off, you can. Okay, so next we have the piece that we did not have to cut interfacing for. So that's going to be serged just on this right side edge here. And remember to not trim any fabric here, so you're going to line up your fabric edge with the blade. Be sure to leave a tail. And trim your serger tails right away. Okay, so this piece, you're actually going to serge. So we have that little extra interfacing hanging off, and we're going to actually trim that with the serger. So I'm going to serge with this folded, so my folded edge is here. And you can either cut the interfacing off with your scissors or just use the serger to cut it and trim it down. And I am going to trim this extra interfacing at the bottom. Okay, now this piece is a bit trickier. So this is a piece that we interfaced, and we're actually going to serge here, here, and serge out. Okay, this is a very sharp corner, so I'll try my best to show you how to serge it without cutting any fabric. So right before I get to that corner, I am going to angle this out this way. And then just kind of do a pivot and put some pressure here. Still making sure that I don't cut, but making sure the angle of my fabric is lined up. Okay, and then I'm going to come off. Oh, pretty good. Again, make sure you leave a thread tail each time so that the serger does not unthread. Okay, so then I'm going to just do a straight line serge here. And I'm going to trim just that little bit of interfacing. Okay, so the next step I did was to press out my pieces. So I just pressed over this to be nice and flat over each piece. This one I actually pressed it at the interfacing edge here so that there's a nice crease and a fold, so it should fold to the back just like this. Okay, so the next step is to take your 7 to 9 inch all-purpose zipper, and I'm actually going to open this up, and I'm going to flip this so that right side is facing down, so I'm looking at the back of the zipper, and I'm going to place it and line up the twill tape with the serge edge of that one layered piece, and then I'm going to take my folded edge, the folded shield, and this is going to be placed over the zipper, so all of these layers will be pinned together. And I do want to make sure that I have my top stitching foot on the machine. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of pin going in and out. Okay, so again, I have my one layer, the zipper, and then the folded layer. And this is a really short sample so that we wouldn't waste a lot of fabric. So I will trim the zipper later. We don't need to do that right now. So I'm going to go in here, and I like to stitch where I can actually see, so I can see the crease on my zipper, so I can make sure I'm getting nice and close with the top stitching foot. Otherwise, you can stitch just on the other side of the serging here. But I think I'm going to go ahead and stitch from bottom to top, and I'm on a number 2 stitch here. And I'm just going to stitch from the bottom of that shield. And I want to make sure that I'm stitching just past my serging, so when I turn it, I don't actually see it. You could also stitch this with a righty-lefty foot. Make sure you're taking your pins out before you get to them. Not too soon, because I can see my fabric wants to pick up a little slack because this is a thick combination of fabrics. Okay, when I get to the top, I'm going to backpack. And I'm going to clip my thread tails. Okay, and there's my shield in here. Okay, not too close to the zipper. And I'm going to go in and just press right on the front of this seam here. So again, this piece we pressed right at the fold of the interfacing. And then this one I'm just going to press so it's nice and flat on this side. Not putting too much heat on the zipper because it will melt. Okay, so for the other half of the zipper, this side of the seam is going to be placed right on top of the zipper here so that these two folded edges sort of kiss. And I'm going to try to pin that in place. So I just want to make sure I'm going kind of in and out, grabbing both edges of the fold. And we will hand baste this just to make sure it stays in place while we do our last two stitches. So just make sure when you pin it that you're not able to see the zipper. And I'm going in and out. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and take my needle with a contrasting color thread because this will come out later. And I'm going to go in and just kind of baste these two edges together. So I'm just grabbing the edge of the fold here and the very edge of the seam. I can put a knot here if I want, but since this is going to come out, I really don't have to if my stitches are kind of close together. As long as I don't pull too hard on it. And I'm just going to kind of baste that seam closed just to make sure everything lays flat when I go to do my top stitch, because we do not want that showing at the front of our pant. Okay, and just remember, this doesn't need to be pretty because this will be coming out after we attach our zipper. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, just slide my needle off and leave a thread tail, pull my pins out. So next step is I'm going to open this up, and you do need to make sure the shield is out of the way. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and stitch my fly front to my zipper here, making sure that I don't pull it too much because you still want to be able to hide that zipper in the seam. Okay, so I'm just going to pin my zipper to my fly front, and it does get a little wider where the zipper pull is, so I just want to make sure I keep it nice and flat. And I'm just pinning through my fly front and through my zipper, and I like to stitch this where I can see the actual zipper, so I may go in and stitch it from bottom to top again. Completely up to you, because you can feel the zipper teeth right here. Just want to make sure you don't get too close. I'm just kind of stitching right down the center of the twill tape. Okay, so I'm actually going to put it this way, so I'm not stitching on my blind side here. And I'm going to start stitching right at the bottom of this sample where the shield starts. And my zipper's here, so I'm just kind of right in the middle, and I'm stitching on number 2. So I'm going to take a couple stitches, pull up my pin and a back tack, and again that shield should be out of the way, so you should not be catching that. Okay, I'm going to stitch to the top and back tack. So clipping my threads. And so lastly, I want to go in and we're going to top stitch our fly front here. Okay, so our zipper's connected in there. We just can't open it because we haven't opened our basting. So I want to actually pin nice and flat, and you may need to press it if your front of your sample got wrinkled here. I'm just going to kind of pin through all 3 layers on that side. So the front of the sample, wait a minute, I don't want to catch my shield, through 2 layers. So the front of the sample and your fly front piece that has the interfacing. Again, don't put too much stress on the seam. You want that to lay nice and flat. And you can choose here what shape you want for your top stitching. So either follow the shape of the serging, or you can draw yourself a chalk or pencil guideline if you'd rather it be curved. I'm going to just kind of follow the shape of where I can see my serging, and I'm going to top stitch that with a number 3 stitch. And if you're not comfortable doing that, go in with a ruler and a pencil and just draw your top stitching line. Okay, and then you need to meet up at the seam. So I'm going to back tack here. I'm going to stitch right down the middle of my serging, turn the corner, and stitch at an angle down, and end it here and back tack at the seam. And again, I'm top stitching on a number 3 stitch, making sure I pull out my pins. Okay, I'm going to leave my needle in so I can pivot. And when I get to that seam, I'm going to get right to the seam and back up. Okay. I'll clip my threads. Okay, so my next step is you can choose to finish this seam at the bottom if you want. I'm going to just go ahead and press it, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out my basting stitch here. And just seam rip this a little bit. So once I get it loose, I should just be able to pull it out. Oh man.
So, for my two fabrics I dyed, my brother accidentally washed one with heat, so it faded. So I just have to figure out what I'm gonna do when I re-dye it again.
Okay.
It's gonna be hard to color match it.
So they're two different colors now?
Yeah, do you want to see them?
Yeah, give me a second. Let me get these things done.
Okay.
And then I'll be over there. I gotta get these videos up, finish them up today. Okay. Okay. I'll come look when I go get something to eat. Okay, so just pressing it, and I'm gonna go in and shorten the zipper here. Okay, to shorten it, I'm gonna go ahead and put my stitch length on 1.5. And I'm going to stitch across here, come up about 1/2 inch above where my seam stops. And I'm going to stitch over it 3 times. So I really have to push it. So I'm going to stitch, back tack, stitch, back tack. Okay, and then I'm going to come about 1/2 inch below that after I cut my thread tails. And trim my zipper. Now if I wanted to complete this seam, I would go in and just stitch right on the fold. That's not necessary for me for this sample. But I would go in and just continue this stitch, just back tack, stitch, and back tack. Okay, so I'm going to start right where my last stitch ended so I can get them as close as possible. And again, I'm going to stitch right next to, with my number 2 stitch, my serging, right on the other side of my serging. And just keep coming down to complete that seam. And last step would just be to press that seam open. I think I overstitched it just a little bit. Yeah, because it should be laying flat. Okay, last step would just be to press this on the front, nice and flat, and then label it. Okay, and there is your zipper, and the shield should not be attached, just at the bottom.